Hello everyone and welcome back to the anniversary. I hope that you're okay. I hope you've been looking after yourself. I think it's rather ironic that at a time when the world's attention is really on race and equality, that this week should mark 99 years since one of the most horrific single acts of racism against black people took place in America. I want to talk to you about Black Wall Street and tell you the story of how one single encounter in an elevator sparked a series of events that led to the murder of as many as 300 black people. In just the span of 24 hours, 35 square blocks were burned with more than 1,200 homes being destroyed. This massacre is completely absent from history books. It was unacknowledged and completely ignored. The newspapers at the time, in 1921, didn't even speak about it, and this is how it began. In the 1920s, the Greenwood district was dubbed Black Wall Street. It was in Tulsa in America, and the community boasted more than 300 black-owned businesses, including 2 theaters, doctors, pharmacists, even a pilot with his own private airplane. The success of this black community, however, caused some white people in Tulsa to become envious and angry. The incident that sparked the Tulsa Massacre, or the Tulsa Race Riots as they used to be known, was between a 17-year-old white girl named Sarah Page and a 19-year-old black man named Dick Rowland. Now, he was a shoe shiner and she was an elevator attendant. This is what we know happened. Sarah, the elevator operator, and Dick would use the elevator almost every single day together. On this particular day, after the elevator door closed and Sarah and Dick were alone in the lift together for a few moments, there was a scream, and nobody knew what had happened in the lift. As the doors opened, apparently Dick ran and he was later arrested. Sarah said that she was assaulted. Some reports say that as Dick was getting out of the elevator, he tripped, he grabbed Sarah's arm, and she screamed, and then an onlooker called authorities. While Sarah Page never pressed charges, authorities did. And by the end of the day, the rumour was that Page had been raped and Dick, he was in custody. This all happened on May 31st. Later that day, a group of black and white men, they confronted each other at the courthouse where Dick was being held. An angry white mob was gathering outside the courthouse and they were demanding that the sheriff hand the boy over. Sheriff Willard McClough, he refused, and his men barricaded the top floor where the black teenager was being held, and they refused to let anybody in. But this wouldn't have been the first time that white men were seemingly allowed to take a black man out of custody and kill him, because a year before this massacre, a year before this race riot happened, a kid who allegedly killed a taxi driver was lynched, and the police apparently handed him over to the white mob and just stood idly by as it happened. At around 9 p.m, a group of about 25 armed black men went to the courthouse to offer help in guarding Dick Rowland, the teenager. The sheriff turned them away, but some of the white mob tried unsuccessfully to break into the National Guard armory to get more weapons nearby. Rumours were flying around of a possible lynching. A group of 75 armed black men returned to the courthouse shortly after 10 o'clock. They were met by some 1,500 white men, and a lot of them were also carrying weapons. Shots were fired and all hell broke loose. 12 people were killed. 10 of them were white. Outnumbered, the African Americans retreated back to the Greenwood district, but by early morning the next day, on June 1st, a white mob started to loot and burn businesses in Greenwood. I wasn't really sure how much information to include in this video about what happened during the week-long riot that was 99 years ago this week. I didn't want to include too much to upset anyone, but I wanted to give you a taste of what this must have been like, even though most of us will never understand what something like this is like. Tulsa, as you can imagine, during the 1900s was extremely segregated, and the area known as Black Wall Street really was a self-contained hub, like I explained before. And over the course of 1 week, it was completely destroyed. White people were deputized, which means they were given weapons by the authorities and just sent on their merry way. They committed numerous acts of violence against unarmed black people, men, women, and children. They even shot a guy who was like in the cinema, just there. He was just in the cinema and they shot him. The mob was spurred on by false belief that a large-scale insurrection was happening among black Tulsans. They thought that nearby reinforcements from towns that surrounded the area and cities where there were larger African American populations were on their way to take up arms, and it fueled the growing hysteria. By day 3 of the massacre, because I'm fed up of calling it a riot, thousands of white people had descended on Greenwood. They were looting, they were burning homes, they were killing people. I've read a lot of text about this and seen quite a few videos. I'll put a link to a podcast that I listened to, and they talk about mass graves in this. But yeah, thousands of white people had descended on Greenwood, looting, burning homes, burning businesses, and firefighters who arrived to help to put out fires, they later testified that the rioters had threatened them and they told them to leave, and the firefighters did, and they continued and continued until there was nothing left. About 10,000 black people were left homeless, and property damage amounted to more than $1.5 million in 1921. That is a gajillion pounds in today's money. It was initially reported that less than 50 people had died. In the hours after the Tulsa Race Massacre, all charges against Dick Rowland, the initial teenager, the 19-year-old boy that was in the elevator, were dropped. The police concluded that he had most likely stumbled. He had most likely grabbed Paige to break his fall or stepped on her foot, and it was completely blown out of proportion because of the jealousy and the anger and hatred that the white people in the area had towards this black affluent neighborhood. Dick Rowland was kept safely under guard in the jail during the riot. He left Tulsa the morning after the fires were put out, and he never returned. The official tally of deaths in the massacre was 36 people, including 10 white people. Even by that estimate, it was marked as the second most deadly riot in US history. It was only behind the New York draft riots of 1863, which had killed 119 people. But we now know that 36 is a gross miscalculation. Greenwood was never able to recover to the heights it had been pre-massacre. And for decades, this act of racial violence was ignored by the US media. It was blacked out. It took 50 years for the riots to be recognised for what they really were, a racially fueled massacre, and it took even longer for the original ridiculous death toll to be looked at. I'm not one for conspiracy theories. I'm not one to tell you to take what officials say or what governments say and completely twist it, but I am one for doing your own research. There have been multiple, countless times since 1921 when the initial reports of death, or when the official statement, official numbers are completely and utterly unbelievable. Just take Grenfell. During a time like this, when the world seems to be facing its head towards black lives, and social media and people and companies all seem to be speaking up for the black people, I think it's really important that we remember the stories of our past. I think it's really important that we look back to 99 years ago, to 50 years ago, to 10 years ago, to 5 years ago, to last year, and see if things really are changing and what we can do to make a difference. Whilst I'm not in a position to go out there and march and fight physically for what I believe in, I've taken it upon myself to share the stories of black people and to share the stories that really paint the picture as to why our movement is so important today. So you can't enjoy the stories that I'm telling you, but I hope you found this informative, and this is an important part of history that was wiped out for so long, and kids don't learn about this in school. So it's up to us to educate ourselves. Thank you.